Okay, so welcome to another episode of Inside CG. Today I have three superstars of Champions Gym. One's already on a call. And today we're going over a big topic that I think isn't talked about enough with full transparency, because the nature of fighting is about being tough, fit and strong. And that's the mindset and mental challenges we face, not only as fighters, but as people practicing Muay Thai. For me personally, I think there's a lot of emphasis on like the physical side of training, and that's, training schedule, train hard, do more, but we often neglect the psychology or the mindset side of training. And I think this is what separates us from like the average to the extraordinary. I know for me personally, when I started Muay Thai, this was just something we got zero of, and things like how we should feel in sparring, how we should feel post-event. I can remember when I had my first sparring session, I was basically put in the ring, completely bashed, went into my car crying and thought, this can't be it. So I always think like a good rule of thumb for me is like be the coach you never had. And I know that you guys are extremely experience-wise and just like really amazing people. So pulling you together today and just kind of like pick your brains about some of the common things that we go through as fighters or people doing Muay Thai. Because I think so many people quit and they don't reach their full potential because they kind of hit these little milestones and I say wig out and just stop because it's too hard to talk about. So we'll start with Brian, give us an intro, and then we'll go to Tim.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Harris, aka Spider. I've had 30 Muay Thai fights, one MMA fight, and one left way or no glove fight. Um, so my biggest achievement in the sport has been able to travel the world to places like Iran, Malaysia, Burma, Thailand to fight and do the thing I love. My biggest challenge has always been self-doubt and the imposter syndrome.
Also, Tim, let's take it away.
My name is Tim Levins. Obviously, my job at Champions Gym is also one of the Muay Thai coaches for the fight team. Back when I was competing, I had about, I think it was 22 fights in total, with my biggest achievement was the WMC state title for my weight class. I think, yeah, like the biggest mental challenge was also self-belief, as Brian said. I think at the start of my fight career, I had like 3 wins in a row. But then after that, like I had 4, 5, or even 6 losses in a row. So to sort of come back from that was a little bit of a struggle, just to start believing in myself again and not just being used to losing every fight.
Awesome, let's go P Money.
Hi, my name is Paul. I'm the founder and director of Champions Gym. My background of about 25 years experience in the game. Had about the same amount of fights as well, 25 fights, one Australian title, all the rest of it. But my proudest achievement is probably when I became a coach and helped people achieve the things that they never thought possible. Yeah, and probably my biggest thing that I struggled with when I was starting out and when I was competing myself was the self-doubt, and then obviously not feeling like good enough to be, and the imposter syndrome that fighters go through. So that's why a big emphasis of my approach as a coach is definitely getting people's psyche and mindset right, given the leadership that I've learned a lot from and invested a lot of my time into in the last couple of years.
Awesome, so let's kick it off. These are just a bunch of commonly asked questions that I've had on the mats and that I've experienced myself. And again, like full transparency, if we can help one person with this podcast today, that's the goal. The first question is, how do you deal with anxiety before class? And I will get Brian started on this one.
Yeah, so this is common and this happens on all levels. I think understanding your starting point and your finishing point is a big one, and just finding a group of friends is probably the big one, which I've seen successful. So everyone at all levels has some sort of anxiety sort of issues or nervousness. Am I good enough? What's going to happen? It's the fear of the unknown. But what I've seen work and what's worked for me is link with someone, and just instantly a lot of that support comes in and you start to feel okay. And then as a coach, I like to identify that stuff really quick. If I see someone can't make eye contact with people, can't do anything, I'm always up and I go be that friend. I go be that person. I go make sure, even if I'm doing something, I go and say hello to that person. How you going? What are we doing today? Da, da, da. Oh, that's great. Identifying that as a coach and as a leader is important because I know what it feels like on the other end.
Awesome. Did anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I did. Thanks. I think the big thing for like the pre-training anxiety is definitely something that kind of like not knowing what you're going and getting yourself into. So I think like over the years, I used to being one of the young guys starting at like 11 or 12 years old. I'd sit and watch the elite level guys. You know, you're looking at national, state, world champions and their training, and like everyone had a ritual. So like for a lot of the guys, they would come in, you know, they'd high five or shake hands with everyone. They'd put their bags down, get the liniment out, and they'd start rubbing themselves down with a bit of liniment, and then the smell of like that Thai oil, it definitely kicked them into gear. You know, like just stimulating and kind of getting comfortable with the environment is so important, number one. And that was definitely something that really helped me a lot when I would sit there and watch everyone and then kind of became part of the same sort of process. And I made it because I was like, if it works for them, it works for me. And probably the next part of that was like, how do I know it's going to be a session. I've got some hard coaches they're going to beat, like, they're going to fight ready. And that was something that was like, okay, how do I not preempt what is inevitable? So for me, it was kind of like, I know it's going to be hard. I know it's going to be horrible, but you don't do yourself any service by overthinking it until you have it. So it got to a point where it was like, don't think about what is happening and just your body and the sport we're doing. If it's a fight sports sense as well, is like test yourself, get yourself to the point where of breaking point and go. When you get in that moment, let's see what happens. And like just you might not ever even get there. And it was kind of like building that strength and that resilience as it came, kind of like traveling down a road, facing a roadblock, finding a way around it, or jumping over and moving forward. So to summarize, it was kind of just not overthinking before getting, which makes it a lot harder.
Awesome. Tim, did you have anything that you would implement in your own training to deal with anxiety?
I mean, they pretty much hit the nail on the head. But where I came from, there wasn't really too many people at the gym. So you did sort of have a small friend group, which made it easier as long as you're friends with your training partners. But yeah, finding a way to just either relax yourself or pump yourself up before the class as well. Like I used to like to just listen to music if I started to feel a little bit anxious or something, like especially on those hard sparring days or those days or weeks leading into fight camp. Just sort of needed to get myself pumped up a little bit. So that's how I would deal with it.
Yeah, awesome. So this is a good one. Common thing we see, especially when they move up to say like the advanced or intermediate environment, is why aren't I progressing anymore? Or they feel like they're going backwards. I know that obviously when you start, you get these like noob gains and you're really good and your kick gets better really fast and then suddenly it slows down. How do you pull the focus in onto the important stuff here? Let's go, P-Man.
Yeah, that's a good question. I love it, and I do see it a lot. It's very common with a lot of people as they step up and progress. Um, and yeah, like games is something that's very real. But like, I think it's one of those things. It's like you have to really sit down and look at yourself and go, what is my journey? Where have I come from? So, like when I was starting out, what sort of a person was I? And like having a good look at yourself in the mirror to go, you know, like what sort of a person was I when I first started? You know, who am I now? And I think one thing a lot of the people, including myself, used to do is a lot like compare yourself to others. So you've got all these killers above you or like better than you, and you kind of go, geez, I can't. Compete." But it was like, well, what can I control in my put and my efforts to I can potentially get myself as good as I can in the time that I have. So like, you know, asking the guys their benchmarks that are better than you is probably a really powerful thing. Is like going, okay, how many person run before training, or you know, how many kicks person throw, you know, without getting tired and like feeling gas, or like how many sit ups or push ups can this be? Kind of like I say this a lot to the fighters in the past is like chase the tails of the people that are great. Essentially, what that is going to lead you to is a path of greatness for yourself as well. But at the same time, always building the blocks based upon where you're at in that point of time, as opposed to worrying about what everyone else is doing because it's irrelevant. You know, it's your journey. When you get in the ring, it's you versus you, and it's not else. That's what.
Yeah, and I know I've had some really good conversations with Brian about like basics, strong foundations, keeping it super simple is actually what's winning fights. But I feel sometimes people chase shiny objects and they want like more techniques. So, like, Brian, elaborate on that with the progression side of it.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I'm a big believer of basics win fights, and an analogy I always used was going back to skateboarding. People always want to do all the flips and the tricks before they learn to ollie and shove it. And Muay Thai is no different. Everyone wants to do all these flashy things that they see on Instagram, um, because it has a level of indicator that I am this good. But when it comes down to the crunch and when things get fast and hard and stuff, the basics are what hold you and what keep you on your feet. Good defense, good stuff like that, good attack, basic attack, high to low, and being able to just score at will. And I think people delve into that part and forget this. And then when it comes down to going to the basics, if they haven't spent enough time in those basics, because everyone wants to be able to do the stuff that looks cool on Instagram. But if they haven't spent enough time in the simple stuff, when it comes to this next level and they're trying to progress, but they haven't got a strong foundation, that's when things start to fall down a little bit. You can never build on something if you don't have a strong foundation. And I believe the basics of Muay Thai, defense, your defending punches, defending kicks, defending in the clinch, as well as attacking. If we don't do that, we can never progress to that next level, which then causes some motivational stuff and get a little bit lost and frustrated with your training. And it's normal. Sometimes you feel like you're going backwards while you're trying to go forwards. So one part of my belief is that if we don't do the basics enough, we hit that a little bit quicker. But then the other part is that you are putting a higher level of expectation on yourself as well along the way. So as you get better, what you don't know, and you can't ever fix. But as you get better, what you know becomes greater and wider and more knowledgeable. And then the expectation of what you're doing and what you want to be doing is greater because you actually know more stuff now. So, and you might not be able to get those things to the T of what you know it should be. And you get a little bit less motivated, a little bit frustrated, and then it goes one or two ways. It's you either give up, pack it up and leave, or you go, okay, I need to put the work in. And the work there's no secret, it's repetitions. The difference between someone being good and great is usually the amount of time they have spent on their craft, and going into that. So having that challenge.
Yeah, what's that quote about, like, if you're happy to be bored, you're going to be good? Like, they say the people that have the ability to just do the basics over and over again are the ones that are going to be excellent. Awesome. And Tim, like, in your opinion, how do you even rate what progression is in Muay Thai?
I think it's all pretty just down to the person on how you rate it. But I think Brian really touched on a lot of things that have to do with training there. But there's also a lot of external factors that can come into play as well. So, like, for example, someone who is young, new to the sport, 20 years old, they have no job, they train twice a day, all they do is watch Muay Thai all day. Obviously, they're going to progress a little bit quicker than some people. Whereas someone who maybe has a full-time job, they have a lot of stress from work, they have kids to take care of. All of this can lead into progression decline, or just they're going to reach their plateau a little bit faster. But yeah, like they could be getting stressed from work, their boss is a dick. So I don't know. All that can sort of lead into a progression decline or plateau, and then they just put too much pressure on themselves, and yeah, stuff like
Yeah,
And
that.
that's where I want to touch on as well. Sorry, I'll just jump in there as well,
Yeah.
Tim. That was what I was saying. Like, it was like, you're completely right, and I couldn't agree more. When you've got someone that trains and live and breathe Muay Thai, and then you've got someone who has work and have family and other commitments, like, you have to really focus on your journey and your path, and remembering why you started. Because the minute you compare to so and so who is training and living and breathing Muay Thai like an elite athlete, even though they're not there yet, they're progressing a lot faster. It's like, okay, where am I now? Am I better than last week or the month ago or like 6 months And like, if I'm not, what do I need to tweak and change that? And like, just little things, like the basics. And like Brian said, it's just building the foundations and going, like the amount of, like an artist with their brush, it's like going back to the touching things up. And like, I know I'm probably on a bit of a tangent here, but like, I had an athlete fighting for a world title not long ago, and it was like, what should I do to get better? And I said, well, let's go back to the basic footwork, defense, evasion, pivots. And they were actually shocked, but I was like, this is the things that are going to make go from here to here, because a lot of those people neglect those things because they are so worried about the fancy. So yeah, just elaborating what Brian was saying.
So obviously, like as a coach, you guys have a hard job of like managing multiple athletes across multiple divisions, across multiple or two sexes, male or female in Muay Thai. And one thing that's very prominent is they start to compare each other, that we just kind of touched on. And I know for someone that's been in the sport for a bit, it's like there's no way I should ever compare myself to another female that's, say, fighting below or above in my weight divisions. Her division may be really busy versus, like a limited pool of people. How do you guys manage the mindset around the comparison game? And just some people just have very good luck. Like when they're active, they may just have a really good pool of people versus someone that's not getting fights because that's just bad timing. Who wants to kick the comparison game
I'll
off?
start with that. And I think the first part before we go into comparison is having a level of trust between the coach and the student is important before we move into any of this. So you've got to gain that trust and work with that, and then have those educated conversations with them. Look, in a scale of thing, let's not go too wide with our pool to start, but let's work on what we can focus on. It's not compared to anyone else. Everyone else's, you can portray a positive argument or a negative argument in anything. So what we kind of have to want to do is work on you first, work on where you want to be, and let's look at some like-minded people and try challenge those ones, rather than trying to challenge someone that you don't really know their journey yet. You don't know how long they've been doing. All you know is a record, and you can delve into that and go, look, there's only 10 people in that pool versus the 35 people that are in our state for your division. It doesn't really achieve anything, in my opinion, except to start dividing. So what I like to do is bring it back to them, set some goals on some people that we can not compare with, but challenge in that. And I think that has a bit more of a positive focus with them. So I think the comparison game can get real toxic real quick, and that's something that doesn't solve anything or doesn't help anyone on the path.
Yeah, I think people also just have to realize that, like, you're all on your own journey as well. Um, you all have your own set of skills. So, for example, like if Brian is really good at kicking and I'm not really good at kicking, some people will just focus on the fact that he is so much better than me at kicking, but I might be really good at clinching. So, like, you need to also realize what your skills are and hone those. So, you won't always be the best kicker, but you can really make your clinch like your best point.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, say, if you two were to fight, Pamon, that would be completely different fights because you work on your strengths and weaknesses, and two fights doesn't mean you're both going to win or lose, if that makes sense.
And you can't compare. If one beats one, that means they're better and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Styles make fights.
Yeah.
If I can just share a little bit of my experience as well, like just when I was competing, fighting myself and coming up in the game, like I was very lucky at 14, 15. I got the opportunity to go train at Sangwon. I got gym in Thailand, Bangkok, one of the biggest stables. There was no white people then, and it wasn't fashionable for white people to train because gambling and the fighters made money for the gyms. And if you were white, you were there. You were like, you had to be chosen to be able to, given time to, and like you had to work your way up. And they didn't want to work with foreigners that weren't there, that were there for holiday. And when I think back, it was like, here I am, a 15-year-old kid, and there's a kid the same age. He's already had 150 fights, and I'm lucky to have 5 fights. And he started at 8 years old. And like, how do you compare? Like if I was to look at him going, he's had 150 fights already, and I haven't had 5. Like I could probably just go home now, give up. But then I was like, you know what? My attitude is I'm taking a risk by being here. I'm invested, knowing that I'm going to continue my growth in this sport, being surrounded by good experience, like the best of the best. I'm just going to give it my best shot, because at the end of the day, my attitude is right. I'm willing to fail forward. I'm not afraid to fail. If I get hit with like something and I'm going to be like, stunned, I'm probably going to just do my best to pick myself up. It'll hurt. I'll probably cry. But at the end of the day, it was like, when you look around, it's like you cannot compare people, but your output and your effort and your energy is most important, because if you're willing to go for it, I always believe there's a way to beat those people. That's what I honestly, always being the underdog. That's what I used to think and train. And that's with anyone that like is listening to this, like, forget the rest, worry about you, and make sure that everything with you is kind of like on point. And be like, if you say you're not going to give up, never give up. The minute you give up on yourself, or you hit with the setback, do give up. The only person you're letting down is you. And that was one thing that was like big on, never give up. And I've hard times, but you
Yeah.
grow, and you never stop growing. Essentially.
All right. Big coach pet hate for me is we put on this great event. They do a sparring day. They go to another gym. Maybe they have a fight. They train so hard. They're there every night. You give them your all. Your shoulders are absolutely fucked from holding pads. You put up with every little whinge along the way, and then after the event, they're nowhere to be seen. They don't come back in the gym. They might even cancel their gym membership because, they didn't really do as well as they thought, because that's normal. We never fight the way we train. How do you even translate this into like a mindset mental challenge?
A debrief is always something I do with whether it's their first inter club, first sparring session, first fight, first anything. One thing I always wait until probably midday the next day, and then I send a debrief out to the group, and I put it collectively, and I give a debrief. So it's usually just 3 simple things: one thing we did well, one thing we need to improve on, and one thing we were unexpected. And then I use that information and help train them through the next couple of weeks. And if I need to have a private message with someone because they're not responding, I get onto it pretty quickly as a coach, for the reasons that a day turns into a week, turns into a month, turns into them not coming back, because they have that fear versus reward now. And if fear outweighs the reward, then they're not coming back. And then there's a bit of education around it's okay to not perform. It's okay. You're going to learn from something. You're going to learn from anything you do. And once again, you can have a negative, you can have a positive. But we like you said, we aren't always going to do our best, but we can learn from that. And in my opinion, if you're doing those stuff and you're challenging your stuff, you're better than the people that can't get over those ropes, in the regard that you are putting yourself to the ultimate test, in my opinion. And that is a win, and that makes me as a coach and as a fighter proud. So
yeah, when you were fighting Brian, when would you return back to the gym?
I would return back 2 days later. So my trainer, so my first initial trainer was Burmese, and his Thai trainer from Thailand would say anything more than a few days makes them lazy and not want to come back. So we had a structured thing that we'd be in 2 days, and we would just stretch and just do some shadow and chat. So we wouldn't actually train until probably, so if we fought on the Saturday, we wouldn't train until Wednesday, Thursday, but we were in on the Tuesday and we were doing something, just being back involved in. If you've got to lick your wounds, it helps being around your circle, your trust circle and your friends, and they get you back up. The family that we create in the gym is super important for that. So be with them, because they will help. And then start the end of the week, we start getting in, because you're going to have niggles and stuff, so do some light stuff, and then probably start training a bit harder the next week. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel like, so it's perfect segue to where I think we should go with this. So often post-fight win or loss, there's like the post-fight blues, and I think people don't talk about, even if you win, you get this, because you're always, if you're a bit of a perfectionist, you look for things that you could have done better. What is a normal feeling after a fight, Brian? And what do you think people need to be aware of there? Like, you're not going to come back in like you were before. You don't have that fire. You shouldn't be training like that all the time as well.
No, you got to have peaks and valleys, but you've got to be constantly working on your craft. Something that I've been listening to a lot in some podcasts recently, and I really believe, and I think I did it, but I never knew, just because I was fully invested in the journey. But work on yourself. So you've got your camp, and that's when you peak your fitness and you get fight ready. But outside of that, you're constantly continuing your craft and honing your style. So if you are a clincher, that's you get in and you work the skills, you work the stuff. You don't have to be training hard. You just have to be continually growing as a fighter. And that doesn't always mean, you know, as hard as you can go, those hard spew sessions, all of that stuff. That's fight camp stuff. Outside of that, Muay Thai is fun. I think anyone that does it for a long period of time is because they love it and they enjoy it. So keep the enjoyment there. Go back to enjoying it and realize and go back to why you love it and what type of fighter you want to be, and just hone your craft. Take the pressure out of it and enjoy it again.
Awesome. So Tim, sorry, P, I'm going to kick you off. Obviously, Tim talked a bit about in his intro about how he went 3 fights undefeated into a few back-to-back losses. If, you know, you could do those days again, how would you approach the post-fight experience?
So I never really had too much time off in between fights, pretty similar to Brian. I'd probably have 3 or 4 days off depending on how banged up I am. But back then I didn't reflect on any of my wins or any of my losses. So like I didn't know what I did well. I didn't know what I needed to improve on. I'm sure it's a really long time to try and remember that long ago, but I'm sure my coach had stuff set in place for me, but I never really did any thinking for myself. Whereas I think if I reflected on my performances, it would be I'd probably be a little bit more successful in those fights that I lost or I didn't perform as well in.
And Pete, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, obviously getting back into training post-fight, whether it's win or loss, I think it's a reciprocal transaction with the team. And I think one thing that I always just think of, you know, like level guys, and then become part of that as well, was like so many people that and about. And then you get in there and you do it and it's done, and then you're done for a while, and then you're like, oh well, all of it's over. But then that feeling of like, my teammates actually got a fight up. It was the excitement to get back in and give back to those people that have helped you. Essentially, it was like jumping in, you know, even if it was just coming for a jog with them to make sure that they got them across the line, and that kind of kept that cycle going. It was really powerful because you help your teammates, they help you, help the team, and you kind of keep going. Before you know it, you're building just a tribe of killers because you're all just, you know, riding off each other's journey, which that's well really helpful.
Yeah, I find, you know, like we're obviously talking a lot, saying like fighters fight, but all these things apply to an interclub, just even sparring, like turning up to sparring for the first time. The same principles apply to that. But next topic, so like post-fight and body image for fighters, I think it's a really important topic, especially today with, you know, social media has completely changed the game. I don't think that social media, when you guys were fighting, was even around. There was no highlight reels. No one had, you know, like their fight record like wasn't so important. Like things have just evolved so fast in the last 10 years that how a fighter should look has become like a big thing. So Tim, I know that this is an area that you're really, really passionate in. Talk us through how an athlete should kind of act post-fight with, you know, the weight gain.
I think it's pretty common with a lot of fighters. It was definitely a really common issue that I faced when I was fighting, where as soon as the fight's over, I regain like 10 plus kilos. So if I was fighting at 60 kilos, I'd be up to 70 within 2 weeks. But I don't really think it's too much about what they do post fight or post weigh-in. I think it's more about the preparation to their fight to begin with. So if you're leaving things to the last minute, which again, back when I was fighting, we didn't have much education around weight loss or cutting weight for a fight. So 2 weeks out, you're still 8 kilos over. You just starve yourself for 2 weeks and then you go sweat it out in the sauna. Obviously, water cutting is still a thing, but you want to get your body fat as low as possible, as close to the weigh-in or as close to the fight as possible. Or you just want to sit at a low body fat year round. So I think a lot of people can be guilty of just leaving it until the last minute, and then they just do this weight cut, which just ruins their body. And then they blow out really quickly because their body is just so hungry for food and they can't resist the temptation to just, what I would do, just eat sugar for 2 weeks after the fight. In saying that, it does just come down to accountability
Yeah.
of the fight. You're your own person. Just don't stuff your face. Like, get back into training as fast as possible. Don't sit on the couch doing nothing and burning 0 calories, because you're still going to be wanting to eat as much food as you were prior to fighting, because your body is used to burning all those calories and needing that consumption of food.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Do you think that the fighters should be super lean all year round, or that they need to be comfortable with like a slight fluctuation?
Yeah, sorry, I missed that point. Yeah, there's going to be some weight gain after a fight or after a weigh-in, but that's just because you've got yourself to such low body fat percentages. So gaining a couple kilos, 3 or 4 kilos, no big deal.
Yeah.
All right. You need that body fat to just perform your normal bodily functions every day. If you're keeping that super low body fat percentage, it will do the opposite. You're going to be in a pretty unhealthy state year round.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I think
Did anyone?
on that part,
Yeah, go.
with people fighting, it all depends on, and that's it. You can't be peaking all the time. So it depends if they're going to be super active. They need to be staying within a nice, comfortable weight range of their cuts, of however they're cutting and stuff. If they're blowing out and stuff, that's not going to do much for their mental confidence. So if they plan on having a really active year, then things like that, dealing with people, having a conscious plan, like Tim said, on your preparation before and after is really important, to not have this big yo-yo effect of big weight loss, big weight gain, big weight loss, big weight gain, because that's going to knock you as well in your confidence. So if you do plan on that stuff, you don't want to be super lean because you need your energy, you need to be able to have that. But if you're having these big yo-yos, then that's going to affect your confidence as well. So just having a plan is super important.
Yeah, and I don't think there's like any magic rule behind being a certain body fat percentage and being a champion. Like, you don't have to look like a bodybuilder to be good at Muay Thai, and so many people need to move away from connecting those two. I've seen it a lot with the girls and the girls chatter in the gym, where they often just strive to look like that and then just develop really bad relationships with their nutrition. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that one, Pete?
Yeah, it is a hard one because I think like a lot of athletes, they want to strive to look like a certain way or conform to what a fighter should look like. And it is hard because it's like driving a high performance sports car, and you look a certain way, and a lot of the guys will train their asses off for 8-12 weeks, and then like Tim said, leaving it to the last minute where they actually do starve themselves, they deplete their energy stores, and a lot of the time it's kind of like just taking all that hard work and throwing it away. Little things like I was talking just recently with a coach was like doing, like a test, 12, 14 weeks out, test to see what you can do and what is a safe means, and also knowing your leanest body weight to ensure that when you do, drop the water for a little bit, it's not going to affect your performance because it's kind of attainable, and knowing that what's safe and what's not safe to ensure it's not going to take away from your performance is so important. Also, the 80-20 rule that I've seen really successful, especially recently, is like not like I used to do this myself, was like cut out all chocolate, cut out all ice cream, cut out all sugar, live like and train like a monk. And the thing is, as soon as that pressure valve is taken off after a fight, guess where I'm going? Straight to bloody eating shit, and I'm not stopping, and there's no control. The biggest and most powerful thing, and I think like Whitney, you introduced me to this, was like the 80-20 rule of introducing like a Freddo a day for someone, knowing that like when you have it, enjoy it, because for the next 8 weeks, you're going to not want to stop that. And that I've seen people like shred up and get some wicked physiques as a result of that without feeling like they're missing out. So a couple little things I really like as well.
All right, so lucky last one, big topic in my opinion. And I see it heaps in the beginners, like the beginners that are coming into sparring, and then obviously some fighters, but overtraining, and why it's not always the answer. Like sometimes I'll come to a Saturday and I'm sparring, and people I'm sparring have done the 2 classes before me, and I can hardly get through that 1 hour session, but they don't progress. So I know that this is linked to a little bit of like self-esteem. What do you think about this, P?
Yeah, it is a hard one because you do see a lot of this day and age. People think like the more they do, the better they can get. But, oh no. I'm a big believer that everyone has 100 units a day, and I think like life outside the gym is going to take some units away. Your sleep, your mood, your surrounding and your environment. So I think it's like for me, I would always look at my energy stores and go, what is going to be the biggest bang for my buck? For the next 2 hours, I'm going to make sure I give it 110 an hour session. If it's an hour, give it 100% during that time, as opposed to doing like 3 1 hour sessions at 33% and get not much return. You leave feeling like you're overtired, you've overworked, you're probably feeling very sluggish, just exhausted. And I think that's something that's very dangerous in this day and age because everyone's like, oh, get more. Writing is like just find the stuff that matters and do it really well. And sometimes that is doing less. Think smarter, not.
Yeah, like personally for me, obviously I know that I'm quizzing you guys on this stuff, but before sparring, I like to be fresh because if I'm fresh, I'm sharp, I'm doing well and I'm motivated. If I come in super fatigued, I'm start missing things, my defense goes out the window. Mentally, I hate that session. Brian, I know that you've been through some hectic fight camps with your Thai coaches. Where do you find the balance in the overtraining and link it to that like self-belief and the self-sabotage type thing?
Yeah, exactly. So I think we just notoriously overtrained, and that was the thing. That's what it was. 3 hour session was a light session. You're running 10Ks and then training. So I think we're notoriously overtrained. So anything like our normal thing was run 10Ks before training. That's a workout in itself, and you shouldn't be training after that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So understanding and like P said, where we're putting into these things and what are we actually getting any benefit out of it besides getting some mental toughness, which we can get by confidence anyway. So you can have negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement. You will develop resilience, but you'll be more resilient if you are more confident. So I know it was the path I took, and I know it was needed. A little bit of that's needed, but it doesn't need to be that way anymore. These big long sessions, like P said, it's quality over quantity. If you can't sustain a performance level, it is overtraining or overworking in that time. Whether that's your weight stuff, whether that's your running, whether that's that. So it has to be in a position where if they can't perform to the level that is what's needed, whether that's an amateur level or if that's a professional level, if that it's in an elite level, because there is different levels, and we have to firstly identify what level they're supposed to be training at. Are they in that? I can't hold the same level for someone who's having their first fight as someone who's having their 15th or 20th fight. The level is different, the expectation's different. So as a coach, we need to be aware of that and be conscious of that. What is their level? Are we taking the fun out of that? Are we putting too much on these first to 5 time fighters, that it still has to be for the love and the fun of it? No one's getting paid, no one's doing anything. They're doing it for the love, so they need to love that. If they're training too hard, a lot of that goes. Now it becomes a job. So first and foremost, are they performing at their level? And if they're not, a lot of people overtrain, but they don't know how to peak. So my sort of thing on this is, are you actually training hard enough, or are you doing a subpar training for too long? So like P says, quality outweighs quantity on this. Do your hard rounds and then have a little bit of a rest, have a rest, do some lighter stuff, and then peak again. That may be mid-session, that may be the next session, but anything you do, you should be proud that you've worked to that level, and you have to peak at that level. So if that's pads, if that's sparring, if that's anything, like all the stuff outside of that, if they're not hitting the level, then that's where you have to have that conversation with them. What's going wrong? You're tired before you're starting. Are you eating? Are you doing this? Are you sleeping? Go through those pillars, those 5 pillars. Are you actually recovering properly in order to perform again? And if that is training too long or not, your workout versus your work in, so you're not repairing properly, you're not eating properly, you're not sleeping properly, you're not hydrated, then that's what you fix first before you start looking at the overtraining aspect. And just shorten your sessions down.
Yeah. Tim, I know that you have a big variety of fighters in your team. Like you've got the pros who have had, 20 fights, and then you've got people having their debuts. How do you manage the people, in their having their debuts or the first, second, third fights, comparing their training load to the pros? Is it something that you find that is a thing, or do you kind of have to catch up with them?
It's not too different at the moment as I think we've only got 2 people that are pros. They're still not even fighting those five rounds yet. It's still the 3 rounds for either 3 minutes or 2 minutes. So their training is pretty comparable. Just the main thing with people overtraining is, as we've already said, that they think more is better, or they just want to do more classes of Muay Thai because they think they will get better. But the people that I do see, they come in before their sessions, but they're not smashing themselves into the ground. They're just in the corner with a partner or a friend doing light drills and doing the low controlled drills to help get your eye in, help get warm before class is going to be a lot more beneficial than doing a general Muay Thai class with someone who doesn't know how to hold pads for an hour and just killing yourself. So, making sure you're partnering up with someone that's on your skill level, that's going to get you those benefits as well.
I just did want to have a touch on that. The post event where people drop off. Just sharing based upon my own experience, and I was holding off there. I know we had lots of subjects to get through, but hopefully we've got a bit of quick extra time because I know a lot of people listening would probably face this as well. It's like I think it's really important for like sparring days or having one fight and then just realizing you don't want to do it anymore. I think it's really important. This is what I used to do, was like think about why you started in the beginning and go, like for me, I wanted to become a world champion. And, I think my first 8 fights I won. And my 9th fight in Thailand, I got my ass handed to me on national television in Thailand. I was on the front page of the newspaper getting push kicked in the face the next day. Like, I actually asked myself, do I really want to suffer this and do I want to do this ever again? But it was like, if I quit now, will I truly be proud long term that I quit? And like, I think when I link it back to people in their journey, whether it's a sparring day or a fight or an interclub, it's like, think about why you started. So for someone, it might be getting more confident or being more consistent or being more resilient. And it's like, ask yourself when you get into that, looking yourself in the mirror and going, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, if you quit now, are you long term going to regret this decision because you truly never actually got to conquering your own, things that you truly wanted? So that's what I wanted to share because it's a pretty important thing that helped me a lot as well. And it's kind of that constantly chasing better yourself.
Yeah, I'll never forget. So I had my first sparring day, and then I did go back to the gym for a full month because I was like tired, and I still had friends back then, so I went out. After a few fights, you don't have any friends. No one wants to buy your tickets. So I actually reflected on that the other day in prep for this podcast, and I was thinking it was just like a lack of habit. I didn't have the structure in my life. Like I could keep it together for that goal, and I could keep training, turning up every night, doing my food, did the sparring day, and it's like I didn't have any deep ingrained habits to keep getting back to the gym. I went back to the pub and the nightclubs, got on it and stuff like that. And then after a month, I think I dragged myself back to the gym, couldn't fit my shorts, so unfit, and everyone had progressed so much more. And then I got in my head a bit, and luckily I'm a pretty tough person, so I got out of that rut. But it's like that's why it's so important just to get back there on Tuesday and do a bit of movement, like Brian said, because your mind takes over, and then before you know it, you're back at square one.
Yeah, I think with that, I mean, there's 2 sides to that because I think obviously we're all fighters and we only see that journey and to compete and to challenge yourselves and stuff. But the on the flip side, if you do one of these things and you realise that the actual competition part of Muay Thai isn't for you, that doesn't mean you need to stop Muay Thai. Like everyone's journey is different and not everyone is in this to fight. And sometimes I think when we go to this comparison side that if you're not a fighter, then you're nothing in this sport. And that is so wrong. I think everyone has their own part and embrace it. And Muay Thai is for everyone, whether you choose to fight or not. And I think you learn so much about yourself along the way and your self journey is important. That just get back in and go back to the reasons why you initially train, because it's fun, because it's enjoyable, because you feel fulfilled with that. So I think the other side of the non-fighter side is that it's okay to realize that the fighting aspect part isn't for you. And you may come back to it later as well, but at this present time. But that doesn't mean you need to give up and throw it all away.
Yeah, I think some of my best sparring sessions is when like the fighting has not even been on the agenda and you just like embrace beautiful Muay Thai. You know, your defense is there, your evasion, no one's trying to kill each other. It's like technical sparring that's just simply bliss.
If I can just add to that, I think like just thinking like I've been stopped fighting for a long time, but literally getting in there with some of these young bulls and just trying to challenge them, but also keep myself challenged. Like in that fun, like in that moment, it's like so beautiful being able to hold your nerve in a place where you're sparring or doing a drill or you're doing pad work. It's like really just focusing and being so in that moment that nothing else matters. And I think that's so applicable to everything that we do in life, because life is hard, there's good, there's hard, there's pressure time. In that moment, you get so much out of it, and not just always about the fight. It's just having control and that confidence in that moment. So whatever, like life's easy after. That's what I like to think.
Awesome work, guys. This podcast could go on for a few days, I think, because it's a topic I think we're all very passionate about, given our own individual journeys, but we'll leave it there today. I think we need Muay Thai Chats podcast. That's what we need. But thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.